Welcome to the From Scratch Body. I'm Liv. Today we're talking all things sourdough. You may have come across my video where I started with this jar being completely clean, which it definitely isn't anymore, where I started my sourdough starter in front of you. And I didn't know where it was going to take me. I didn't know if it was going to be successful, but my gosh, has it been successful. This incredible starter has now been alive for months, and I kill a lot of plants, so if I can keep this starter alive, you can too. It is very easy, and it has aided me in making some amazing loaves, baguettes. It's been absolutely incredible, and I feel like my journey has still just begun, but I'm loving doing sourdough. It is not something for just super brilliant bakers and clever people who have tons of time on their hands. This is just, it takes a little bit more patience. It takes a little bit of, remembering that you have a starter that sometimes needs to be fed. Other than that, it really is so easy and so much fun, super rewarding. And let's talk about the most important thing possibly with sourdough. It is a lot better for our gut than commercial yeast. And that is because the different types of bacteria, there's a whole range of bacteria that you have created and captured into this yeast that you have created yourself. When they make commercial yeast, they take the safest bacteria strains and make yeast from that, but it's not very diverse. So our gut microbiomes, they will not get all sorts of different bacteria, which is super important. I'm sure that you've heard all sorts of things about how important it is to take care of your gut. And it is more important than we ever knew. Sourdough is fermented. This is fermenting what you're doing right here, and fermented food is time and time again being shown to be so good for us. So I really recommend trying to do sourdough. You don't have to be a sourdough sort of devotee and spend all your time doing it. I don't spend all my time doing it. I'll go 2 weeks without really touching it. So it doesn't have to be your new hobby. It doesn't have to be your new obsession. It's just something that can help you in the kitchen. If you do like to bake bread, baguettes, pizza, focaccia, whatever you want to use this starter for, it's a better way of consuming that kind of food. It is also a lot more fun. So let me tell you a little bit about what I did after the video where this jar was empty, and I started it with half a cup of flour and 1/3 of a cup of warm filtered water. That's basically what I've kept doing. So the first 7 days I kept, you can watch these short videos that I've also put up on YouTube, day 1 to 8, because it was on day 8 that I had a successful living starter. It can take 7 to 14 days. It really depends so much on temperatures, on the air quality, like everything around you and your kitchen. Really depends. So just be patient and also be alert to what's going on with the starter. So every day I checked on the starter. I took a little bit out, just kind of replace some of the bacteria and stuff that's going on in there. Took a little bit out. At first, when I was learning about making the starter and stuff, I was quite religious about taking the right amount out, like half of the amount in there, and then putting in half a cup of flour and 1/3 of a cup of warm water. Now I'm a lot more relaxed about that, because actually really all you need to do is take a bit out, and then you just add some more, because you want to keep replacing what's in there and feed it with something new. So for those first 7 days, that was all I kept doing, feeding the starter with flour and water. There are different types of flour that you can have different levels of success with. I don't recommend plain flour. I recommend that you try a strong, you've probably seen those packages of strong bread flour in the shops, and you might be like, what's strong flour? Basically it means that it has a high content of protein. So the higher the level of protein, the likelier, if I'm going to generalize, the likelier you are to succeed with your starter and also with your bread, because it just makes it easier for it to rise, for it to bind, all of those good things. So strong bread flour, I've both used wholemeal flour. That's actually what I used the entire first week of creating the starter. And I've also used white strong bread flour. Now, it's important to keep in mind that protein, a lot of protein in flour essentially means gluten. That's what it is. Gluten is proteins. I'm sure there are other proteins in flour as well, and people who know more about this kind of thing can educate me, please do in the comments. I'm very happy to learn. But gluten is definitely a huge component that we're talking about here. Now, something interesting that I learned about myself and my body, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I think this is important, is that I found this wholemeal flour that had a very high protein content, and I thought, yes, that's fantastic. I used it to keep this starter going, and I actually had a really funny experience where I'd been using white bread flour for a while to feed the starter, and it was kind of poodling along, but it wasn't really bubbling very well, and I was eager to get it bubbling so that I could make some bread with it. So I used this wholemeal flour with about 14 grams per 100 gram of protein, and I put it in the microwave with the door open, door ajar, because then the light comes on and it just warms it up just that tiny bit so that it's in a really nice temperature. And I was sat in the kitchen working, and suddenly I just started hearing these noises behind me. It kind of went like it's just like there was like a ghost flying behind me. I was like, what is going on? And it had literally started. It was about halfway up, I'd filled it, and it was so successful, this mixture of exactly that wholemeal flour and the water, that the starter was just coming alive and literally oozing out of this jar. I opened it and it just went, I've got some really good photos of it. And I thought, it was a bit terrifying at first, but I thought, yes, that's exactly what I've seen in those like really cool photos of the starter just kind of basically coming out of the jar. So that was very good for keeping the starter alive. However, when I used that flour in my bread, this wholemeal flour, I think it was potentially just over the edge of how much gluten or something else, some kind of other protein in it that I could take. And so I felt really not very good after eating that bread. It looked lovely, it was a very successful loaf, but I felt a bit heavy and it wasn't very nice. And I thought, this is not how you're meant to feel after sourdough bread, because it's meant to be so much better for your gut. So I experimented, I kind of went back to surprisingly more white flour, with a slightly lower protein content, and that I feel perfectly fine when I eat it. So a little bit of a weird one. I don't, have all the answers as to exactly how it works. It's also important to know that, or important to keep in mind, that every single person on this planet has a different combination of bacteria, gut bacteria. So there is no one answer to what is going to work for you, what's going to make you feel good, what's going to be okay for you. You have to just experiment, and you have to do what's right for you. I'm just sharing what happened for me there. So if you are reacting badly and you think, oh, sourdough is not for me, it might just be the type of flour. So that might not be so important for the starter. Maybe just go for what makes your starter grow the most, and then focus on what you put in the bread, because the starter is only a small part of the bread. But what I'm gonna say is, basically, if you wanna join me on this sourdough journey, because I'm gonna do some sourdough recipes and stuff as we go along, I really recommend that you check out either my website, because I have a day-by-day first week of creating a sourdough starter list, so you can just follow that. I also have done a short video, so on YouTube Shorts. Basically, if you go to my channel and check out Shorts, and I have a playlist as well that you can find it in. You can check out day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, exactly what I did. Obviously, that's with what happened with my starter, and your starter might be different, but it will be a guide as to how you get the starter going. Now, when you have your starter, you don't need to feed it every day anymore. I put it in the fridge, and the idea is that I feed it once a week. The truth is that I sometimes forget, and sometimes I feed it every other week. And honestly, the second if I decide that I'm going to take it out of the fridge, get it into room temperature, feed it, probably keep it in the microwave like I was talking about with the door ajar to get it to a nice temperature, it wakes back up, it bubbles. I do the test, which is basically a glass of water, a teaspoon of the starter in the water. If it floats, it's ready. If it sinks, it needs to be fed again, or I need to wait until it has more time to bubble up and be ready. But yeah, it comes back to life. I was away over Christmas for about 2 weeks. I came home, I took the starter out of the fridge, and I looked at it and I thought, after maybe an hour or something, when it come back to room temperature, I thought, this looks ready. It's bubbling. It smells really sweet. All of the boxes are ticked for a starter that's ready to be used. I had not fed it for 2 weeks, and I used the starter to make baguettes, and they were just absolutely perfect baguettes. The starter was indeed alive and kicking, and I could use it. So don't think that it's massively high maintenance to do any of this. It's really easy, and as I said, if I can do it, you can do it. You don't need to be super organized. So if you have any questions as to where to start with your starter, check out my website. There's some basic sourdough steps there, sourdough day by day, and you can start your starter, and then you can join me making bread, making baguettes, everything that we're gonna discover. I've made bagels as well, absolutely incredible. I'm going to do a separate troubleshooting video as well for typical problems that people might have and typical questions that people might have if they're not really getting their sourdough starter to work for them, to be ready to make bread. So check that out as well, and if you have any questions, you can pop them below here or below that other video, and I will answer them as soon as I can. Good luck with your starter, you can totally do this.